It's starting up. There we go. Now it's all right. So ask your question again.
Um, yeah, I'd asked why would it be rude for somebody to ask Bhikkhu Buddhadasa whether he was enlightened?
Um, First off, it would be rude because of Thai culture. And the Thai culture itself already knows how to get those kinds of answers. It's the Westerners who doesn't know how to get that kind of answer without asking directly because that's the Western way. So basically, the rudeness comes in cultural. What's in rude in one culture is not rude in another. But when it's cross cultural, for instance, if the Westerner is merely being curious and asking the question because he really doesn't even know how to figure it out for himself, when the Thais hear that, depends upon which Thai it is. Some of them may be confused and angry that you would ask such a ridiculous question, and others would laugh, saying, "What a stupid question that is to ask." And others would who would actually have be in the position of answering the question would want to deflect it rather than answering it directly, especially if there are others listening.
Okay.
All right. Now there is a Patty rule. There's two of them. One of them is much more severe than the other one. The one is for a monk to declare himself to be at a certain status that he is not at. In other words, lie about it. But there's also a minor rule that the monks don't say what status they're at to anyone. Now, here's several reasons for that. One is that the monk himself may be confused about where he is. And if he declares something, now he's in trouble. If he declares something, to declare something takes extraordinary uh, claims require extraordinary proof. In other words, if someone declares to be an Arahant, how can they prove it? Or even if they admit to be an Arahant, then at least they would have to describe, which I'm about to do to you, for you, describe to you what are the qualities of an Arahant so that you can figure that out for yourself, not only so that you can go around judging others about whether they're Arahant or not, but it gives you a step ladder of what you've got to do for yourself.
Okay.
Because it's kind of good to know the road you're on. But going back to the point of if the monk answers yes or no, then he's going to fall onto one of the areas of the Patty Mark that a wise monk will avoid. And so the answer to that question has to be a different kind of answer. All right. One of the ways that would be a suitable answer is that all of the people who hear the answer are confused by it. And if everybody's confused, then we at least postpone the issue.
Uh huh.
And the confusing answer would be I'm both or I'm neither. I'm
That is
neither
confusing.
enlightened or not enlightened. And this was one of the options that the Buddha would take often.
Okay, but isn't it helpful just for the person to be open about it sometimes?
Well, yes, open in an investigation rather than open in a question. That in fact, let us start it this way. Not many months ago, I was in conversation with Brenda. Actually, I think she said this in an email. and that she was gossiping. But what she said was, a particular monk that she knows, that I know, who speaks English well, and that we both know him, but I'll leave his name off for no reason at all, that she overheard him speaking in Thai language to an elderly Thai man while they were on the big ferry boat together, that this monk said that Achan Po was an Arahant, and that they were discussing that together as if they were in agreement. Well, now that was the right and proper way to do. You see, that old Thai man probably fairly well knew Achan Po and also fairly well knew the attributes of an Arahant. And when you have a description, a list of items, and you can see someone that just ordinarily looks like it's worthy of going through this list, this checklist, and you start looking at Achan Po and you say, have you ever seen Achan Po angry? No, check that out. Have you ever seen Achan Po ask for anything? Ever? The answer is no. He'll make opportunities available for people to be generous, but he never asks for anything to be done. All right, so you check that one off. Another one that we would check off, have you ever seen him in a hurry to get someplace so that if you stop and talk to him, he just stands and talks? Or does he ever say, oh, I've got to go? The answer is no. He's always present. All right. The next question would be, have you ever seen him anxious in a hurry? I just covered that. So the next one would be, have you ever seen him talk about other people? Or does he discourage when students comes to talk about, oh, Mr. X, Y, and Z did this, that, and the other thing on the other side of the temple? Achan Po just does not want to hear about it. And that's a very strange thing. How can an abbot run a temple if he's not even interested in all the bad behavior that happens at the temple? The answer would be, think of it as like a spoke of a wheel. Or not a spoke, but the hub of a wheel. That the entire wheel is the temple going around, and that there are very many spokes of various people at various levels, but that Achan Po is not actually the hub that's spinning slowly. He's more like the hole in the hub where the axle goes. He's the axle, so that even though the wheel spins around him, he doesn't have to spin. So he doesn't get conceited. He's not curious about what other people are doing. He's not comparing himself. He's not going around finding fault.
Mm-hmm.
And yet monks who misbehave, if they don't confess it on their own, they'll get questioned about it. But not by Achan Po. It'll be one of the other monks, a senior monk. So in that regard, you can start checking these items off the list for Achan Po, and so far so good. I can't even think of any more items that we want to put on that list. If he's never conceited, if he's never curious about other people's wrong behavior, if he's never in a hurry, if he never gets angry, if he never wants anything, that he's never solemn, he's always just, there he is. Then these are the kinds of things that can be checked off. Now, surprisingly enough, there is a wide variety of people in Thailand who makes these classifications. But in the West, because of our, let us say, even though someone is not a Christian, the Western society is deeply, deeply polluted, if not poisoned, with a lot of magical thinking that comes out of Christianity. Unfortunately, every language and every culture is poisoned by its own magic. But But part of the problem with the word enlightenment or even Buddha is that the Christians tend to put him way up there on the high shelf rather than seeing that a Buddha or one who is awakened is like a noble, the highest quality of humanity, the kind of things that are actually reachable and doable and wonderful. Too much of a good thing is wonderful, so they say. All right. So, not engaging in false speech, not engaging in wrong behavior, not doing the kinds of things that are expected would then be one of the ways that monks, especially as they're getting older and or possibly more well known, believe me, the Thai people, they start they bring that list out and they start checking off marks to see where that guy is. And that's why it's so well known that there are so many of them. I wouldn't go so far as to say one per temple. There's probably not every temple has an Arahant, but the Arahants that are very well known. Um, Here's an example. Achan Mahaboa died in 2012. I was there in Udon Thani during that period of time. I had known about him. I only saw him one time, but I didn't have a relationship with him. But it was widely known throughout the Thai community that he was, in fact, an Arahant. And when that funeral happened, boy, was it a biggie. Talking about a funeral, his lasted 100 days intentionally, with generally at least a parade every day. He was that highly regarded and highly respected in Northeast Thailand. Now, I invite you to actually listen to a Thai talk, but it's got English subtitles that is on YouTube. And it is a talk of Achan Mahaboa giving a talk on Do Arahats Cry?
Mm-hmm.
And basically what was going on is that I don't know the situation, but it sounds believable that either he or some other well-known Arahant had been crying over something, or at least had leaky eyes. And so this comes up because now the gossip machine will start up. Do we put leaky eyes on the list or not? And Mahaboa's talk was about basically the world that the people live in. But he just says right outside the temple walls, the world starts, and it is suffering. And he has great compassion for the suffering of the world, and he would like it for them to wake up and to stop causing each other so much grief. And then he says something quite remarkable that I imagine the Westerner, they will start adding items to the list of low-class language. Does a monk use low-class language? Because at one point in this talk, he calls the world a toilet full of shit.
Okay.
And that while it is correct and true to translate the Thai word ki into the word shit, because that's exactly what it means, the Thai word ki is an often used word throughout for all kinds of reasons. Nam ki is piss, ki is just shit, ki bari is ash of a cigarette. That's how this word is used in Thai language. But it also has that low-class connotation, but it's quite permissible for Arahant monks in Thailand to use such language because he's trying to shock them, just like Achan Bhikkhu Buddhadasa would use low-class language intentionally to shock the people. And what I mean by that is the Thai language actually has, I think, about 5 classes, 4 classes. One is very, very high royal language. And then a sub one of that would be court language, the language that when the kids go to university to study law, basically they have to learn a whole new language. But that's true about medicine also. Medicine in the West has almost its own vocabulary, its own language, as you know. The next one would be street language, just used in general. That's also the language that they'll use on television. It's common language. And then there's low language. And even lower than that would be guttural or mafia language. And that kind of language is the kind of language that has a lot of threats and a lot of stuff like that. But Bhikkhu Buddhadasa will actually use the low-class language and low-class vocabulary just to get people surprised, to wake them up. That's the job of those who actually are awake, is to go and kick somebody when they're asleep and say, wake up, wake up. And so that whole class then, there is a kind of language that the Thai people speak that I hear Tam on the telephone. And it sounds like to me, because I don't understand any of the language that it said, it sounds like really harsh, like she's complaining to a vendor about some product that she bought that's no good and she wants her money back. But in fact, she's just talking to her friends, just talking in ordinary language. That's what I think a lot of foreign languages, when you don't know the language, they sound strange, and because they sound strange, they sound dangerous, or of a lower class than they actually are.
Okay.
So this is how Achan Mahaboa sounds. And yet, the thing that's the most curious is, and you have to listen to the whole tape for the whole thing, is he never blames anyone. He never mentions, there are those who claim that Arahant should not cry. He doesn't mention that kind of thing. Nor does he bring himself or any other monk in it. He uses the concept of Arahant completely in the abstract.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which is showing no conceit. In other words, if you know what you're looking for, you can watch that one video and start checking marks off for Mahaboa, because this would be one of those very tense things. And right at the end, it was like the cherry on top of it. He says, and this is not the first time that we've had to have this talk, folks. We're covering old ground, and you didn't get it the first time. Please understand it this time. And so you can see that there was some emotional loading in there, but it wasn't loaded for him. It was loaded in the audience who needed to hear this stuff straight, almost as if it was a lion's roar. The Mahaboa is roaring like a lion on that video, and it's on YouTube. You can probably go onto YouTube and search for words like Arahant, anger, Mahaboa, and it should surely show up. Except that the way you spell Mahaboa, I think it's Booh or something like that. A.
Mm-hmm.
So now that you're beginning to understand that there are ways of telling, now Skype's a little bit difficult because the only time that an individual student will see an individual teacher is only during, like 1 hour a week or something like that. And so there's no much of happening or actions that would put one to the test.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the Skype is an unfair way of looking at it. because there's not an, let's say, you have to go into the kitchen to see where the heat is. And the internet doesn't provide that very well. But in that particular case with Mahaboa, that's a very, very good example. I would like for a lot of people to take a look at that so that you can see the power of one who has right view. That also the Buddha was known as a lion, and he had a roar. Bhikkhu Buddhadasa also had that kind of presence. He had a roar of authority about him, which is very noble. It's a very, very high class way, because when the mind is noble, then the speech is noble. Noble speech is the hallmark. So they don't tell lies. They don't gossip. They don't use harsh language in the sense of being harsh at criticizing someone or harshly against something. Though in the Western mind, we use the word harsh language as low-class language. Oh no, monks are quite capable, high-class monks are quite capable of using some very low-class language intentionally to get people's attention, to wake them up. So, now that you know this, I think that you can start to make your own judgments without having to ask. Because in fact, what we've done is we've merely only covered some of the fetters. Some of the fetters that we haven't covered would be the ones that would be the most difficult to detect. Like, is the monk afraid of things? Is he afraid of anything? Is he fearless, even in the face of death? Rajchan Po, yeah, check that one off too. Not afraid of anything. So not restless, not worried. These are the things, so that there's no suffering.
So, anytime that somebody reaches any of the stages of awakening, does somebody have to then validate it and say, have a list and say, ask them questions and then check off to see, oh, yep, you're a stream winner or a stream enterer, or is that how it works, or is that not how it works?
Something like that. But let's look at it in another way. If someone has recognized, for instance, that it's been a long time since they've been angry, then they begin to watch and be mindful to make sure that they're beginning to keep track of any possibility of anger, so that finally they can come to the conclusion, yes, anger is finished. I haven't been angry. I haven't shouted at anyone in 5 years or so, like that. That would be a way of telling. So this is something that an individual has to do for himself, is to keep track, to watch these things, to note what defilements are left. When was the last time that we had that defilement that was rememberable and notable? So that we begin to get on guard for, when was the last time I was conceit? I was in competition with someone? When I compared myself, I'm as good as you are kind of mentality. And so after a time, we recognize, oh, we've had many encounters with people and conceit has not arisen. I've been watching for it. I've been mindful to not compete with anybody over anything, just be friends with them. Whether they agree or disagree is not the issue. The issue is, can we be friends? So then, over a long period of time, he recognized, oh, I can be friendly with anybody. You know, back in the 1930s, there was a very, very famous radio movie personality named Will Rogers. He was known by the politicians. He was from Oklahoma. And one of the things that he was noted for was the statement, everybody I meet is a friend. I don't have any enemies. Okay, and this is the way he said, I never met a person I didn't like. That was his statement. I never met a person I didn't like, okay? So what that did was it put Will Rogers in a status or a class that few people can get to naturally. And that was that he was noble. He was friendly with everybody. He didn't meet a person that he didn't like. So that's also the way that an Arahant would deal with people, deal with them on a friendly basis. The Buddha, even when those would come to be angry with him, he probably was joking when he says, what are you going to do with a gift that the receiver doesn't want? Are you going to keep it? Well, you can keep your anger. I don't want it. So that's the quality of nobility, is the intentional attitude of friendliness, which is actually the definition of metta. So in that regard, the Arahant is the one who can actually practice metta without practicing. He plays metta like it was a violin. So, any more questions on that?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
well, it's kind of related. It's kind of a curiosity question about how common stream entry actually is among people who are monks or among people who have devoted their lives to it. Is it a rare phenomenon or is it pretty common?
First off, we have to understand that there is a sequence of events, one step after another, but that they're not always have to be arranged in that particular order. All right, and here's the point. It is possible for someone to be absolutely, completely free from doubt and therefore get on their own version of the Eightfold Noble Path without going through the first two fetters first. And that kind of person is quite often. In other words, there are people who are really dedicated to the path of the Buddha who still believe in rebirth.
Mm-hmm.
And by believing in rebirth, that means that I am not absolutely temporary. I am also kind of long lasting.
Yeah.
And they also get the idea that not only am I just temporary moment by moment, but that somehow or another I have to prepare for the future and clean up the past while I've got to deal with the present moment. And in fact, cleaning up the past and preparing for the future winds up being more work than it's worth. And they wind up not spending a lot of time in the present moment. But once the students get over personality view, give up past and future self and lives and whatnot, and deal only with this present moment, then they can go through the fetters in sort of almost like a march, up 2, 3, 4, right through those fetters, step, 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 right up to the top. It's almost guaranteed, in fact, that when someone reaches full fruit of Sotapan, so that they are finished with the first three fetters, then they are bound by their own determination to finish the path. And that they say that there is at most for an Arahant, for a stream enterer, 7 lifetimes. Now that can be stated in several different ways. One of those 7 ways of looking at 7 lifetimes is the the Sotapan is only going to get angry about 7 times, or let us say, have 7 argumental things to say in a conversation before he realizes that he's angry and he shuts up. And
Okay.
so then the anagami is going to be at the point that he's got anger. He knows he's angry, but he's going to shut up before he ever says anything. To where the Arahant just doesn't get angry.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now I've got that a little bit confused because there's also that Sotagami step in there, and that's where most of the anger is finished off. So that the guy gets really, really slow to anger, but it's only at the state when he moves into the complete. There is a little confusion between what is the fruit of the anagami and the path of the Arahant. That's a really strange area to try to pin down very well. And in fact, it's probably, since there's no sutta references for that realm, it's probably not important. Then, in fact, the boundaries are very loose. That the fruit of the Arahant is, in fact, the path of the fruit of anagami is the path of Arahant, and you can just see them that there are still these things to do, and at that stage, the fruit of the Arahant is no anger for a long, long time. Anger is way deep in the past. But for the fruit of the Arahant, the path of the Arahant and the fruit of the anagami would be that here is anger, but we don't let it out. We're going to stop that stuff and change it before it ever comes out. And then over a long period of time, we recognize I never let any of that stuff out, and now it doesn't bother me at all anymore. So when you can understand that about anger, then you can also see it with materialism.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so it takes a long time for that stuff to sort of rot away so that we're absolutely sure. That's why they talk about it as 7 lifetimes. But the path is definitely guaranteed. That if you're absolutely determined to be free from materialism, every time that you catch yourself being materialistic, you can deal with it and drop it. And then eventually you get to the point of saying, oh, yeah, I used to be materialistic big time, but now it's not an issue anymore.
Okay, yes, but so how common is that then? The first, the stream entry then among people who practice, like who are in monasteries and stuff.
Well, because of the dedication to the path is one of the most important qualities of the Sotapan, it would be necessary to give most of the time in, or women who ordain as mechis, credit, but not all of them, because not all of them become monks because of the Dhamma. Some of them become monks because of social pressures or family issues or expectations of getting a higher quality wife after the young man ordains. There's all kinds of reasons why monks ordain in Thailand. In the old days, it was educational. That the mom and dad would actually ordain their 6-year-old son so that he could get a good education. He'd be taught how to read and write Thai and Pali. And so now that the Thai government has gone whole hog into making a really excellent educational system here in Thailand, that reason for becoming a monk has dwindled.
Uh-huh.
And so that was beneficial because those monks we really didn't need in the Sangha anyway. Though many of those young monks who came in because their parents wanted them to get an education wound up uh, being staying monks for their whole lifetimes, becoming enormously benefited from that. Achan Po is one.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was a Samanin also. He stopped at the age of 15 because of his family business, but then he went back into the monkhood. So both of them were in robes long before they were fully ordained. And that used to be very common in Thailand, but now not so much anymore. But you could go so far as to say, generally for Westerners, if a Westerner goes so far as to come all the way over in Thailand, go through all of the stuff that he's got to go through to get ordained, and then ordain and stay ordained, that's some dedication to the path. And we got to give those guys a great standing ovation,
Uh-huh.
regardless of their motivation.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless of what they believe, that dedication to the path is there, and that doubt has been eradicated, whether or not they have finished up the first two fetters or not. That one of the examples of not finishing up the first two fetters is monks get overly devoted to rites, rules, rituals, patimokkha, doing it the right way, proper behavior, perfection of morality. And then, in fact, that's kind of the method that they practice with Ajahn Chah's group now, though Ajahn Sumedho doesn't appear to have been in that. It looks like that whole tradition got started by Ajahn Pasano, but I'm not sure. In any case, Wat Pananachat became quite rigid for no reason at all, when they could have remained joyful and had probably more arahats. In fact, that was one of the questions that was asked of the Buddha late in the game when Buddha was getting old. The monk came and says, this is a paraphrase, there used to be a lot of arahats and there weren't so many rules. But now we got a lot of rules and we don't have so many arahats. And the Buddha says, yes, I know. I made each rule when it was necessary to make the rule, but now I'd like to break them all and start over again. And then, in fact, at his death, he gave that permission to the monks. And at the first conference, they didn't address the issue very well. But at the second conference, which happened a number of years later, the Patimokkha and the Vinaya was the whole issue. And that they could not come to an agreement of which rules to drop. And so they kept them all.
Mm-hmm.
And that was to the detriment of the Sangha. So the Mahayana, one of the distinctions between the Mahayana and the Theravada is the Theravada generally gets stuck into a set of rules that are unnecessary, set up 2,500 years ago, and every one of them was situational. But the Mahayanas, they kind of make their own rules. An example of that is in China, they could not do Bendabat. It just didn't happen. And so the monks there broke one of the rules of digging in the earth, and they became gardeners. And now Chan Buddhism still is alive, even after the Cultural Revolution tried to kill it off. So,
Uh-huh.
so breaking these rules has actually benefited the Sangha. And keeping the rules may not be the right thing to do. And an Arahat will recognize that. But people who don't understand Silabhata Paramasa don't understand the attachment to rites, rules, and rituals. And see, people will only begin to understand the attachment to rites, rules, and rituals once they understand the concept of self. You see, the rites, rules, and rituals of any organization are wrapped up with the karma, what we call the law of karma. And the law of karma is what operates on rebirth. And that the Brahmins started that about 800 BC when they were trying to keep control by saying that we are Brahmins, we're better than you are because we were good in the past. And because you're not Brahmin, you were not as good as us. And this dog here was really bad in the past, and that's why he's a dog. And that was the way that they got started. That was the whole idea of past lives being responsible for the situations that you're in today. But modern science can just see right through that. People are leaving the Christian church left, right, and center because they don't believe the hogwash anymore. The stories, especially the big story, is I will live after death. And that's the story of religion. Why? Guess what? It's a very delicious story because most people are afraid of dying. So to come to the stage of personality view so that you know that everything that's happening is temporary, that gives you two new freedoms. The first two fetters. The first fetter is personality view. We drop that. We say, okay, we got to take care of the here now and leave the past and the future alone. And we have to, number two, take care of the here now based upon what's happening here now, not upon some old, long laid down set of rules for society, because those set of rules have never, ever gotten anybody out of suffering. Only by paying attention to suffering and avoiding suffering can somebody get out of it, not by following any rules. And so these are the first two fetters, and when that's broken along with the fetter of doubt, now the Sotapan is really on the correct Sotapan's path. So that now his dedication will take him through eagerness into absolutely blown out joy over how wonderful the Dhamma is, and puts him in that dedicated path to finish the job so that he will stop being angry, being on guard for not letting anger out, being on guard for not letting any materialism out, being on guard for eventually being on guard for conceit, to not compare ourselves to anyone, to see everyone as a friend, to not ever be in a hurry, to always take it easy, to not be driven by anxiety or tension or restlessness, but to take it easy with every step.
So
unless of course the Arahant has diarrhea and he's 10 steps from the toilet door, then he is okay for the hurry. One exception.
So, but then it seems like then stream entry is fairly common then among monks. It's a pretty common occurrence. Is that accurate to say?
Yes, very accurate to say, whether they know it or not.
Uh-huh.
The real issue is the eradication of doubt and dedication to the path. But that makes the wrong so that's the Sotapan, but it's the wrong kind of Sotapan. The right kind of Sotapan is the one who is eradicating any beliefs about the past and the future, and not dwell in the past and the future. Who and also is eradicating any beliefs in what I call greb. Greb. Have I talked to you about greb? Greb.
No.
Okay, G is for government, R is for religion, E is for education, and B is for business. And that is your enemy. Greb.
Wait, so you're saying, I understand now maybe. So you're saying that they may have gotten rid of the third fetter, right? Which is self-view, right?
First. Self-view is first. The third fetter is doubt, eradication of doubt.
Okay. All right. I see. But then if you've just gotten rid of the third and not the first two, by definition, then you're not a stream enterer, right?
Not really, no. In fact, you could go so far as to call a strap-on bomber working for ISIS a stream enterer
Uh-huh.
because of his dedication to the path.
Uh-huh. I mean, it seems like the main thing is the self-view, right? That seems like the most important
Uh-huh.
to me.
Exactly so. Exactly so. And yet there are many people who claim not only stream entry, but higher than that, and still believe in rebirth, at least at some basic level.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't understand that just at an intellectual level, I don't really understand that. But I'm sure that they have some kind of mental gymnastics that they do to make that make sense, I guess.
Most than likely it's going to be because they've had some experience that they haven't let go of. They're still clinging to an experience, perhaps a whole dozen experiences of various past lives that they've had. And so they
Okay.
cling to that memory. Or another way to cling is because someone has made some public declaration, true or false, about having had past life experiences,
I
or
see.
advertise themselves as a teacher who teaches people how to get past life experiences. In other words, there can be some charlatanism in there,
Uh-huh. I see.
or at least self deception
Mm-hmm.
that then is used to deceive others. And so, because of that, they will then cling to it. Now that I have claimed this, that, and the other thing, I cannot say, oh, by the way, it's all a bunch of hogwash.
Mm-hmm.
Unless they also manufacture some sort of epiphany or some sort of new experience so that the new experience trounces the old experience, which is exactly what happened to the Buddha in the story of the three watches of the night. Have we talked about that?
I don't think so.
All right, the three watches of the night. The first watch of the night is when he sees all of these very many past lives.
Uh-huh.
And I think, in fact, they go up to about 100,000 or so, but many, many past lives. Now, this is one night. So a watch of one night is about 4 hours. And yet, 100,000 lives, if you do some calculation, if you had one full past life per second, that's going to take 28 hours.
Uh-huh.
Can't do it in four. And yet he's talking about it in the sense of naming names, places, recognition. I was this, I wore these clothes, I had this family, etc., like that. That's very hard to conjure up in 1 second. All
Yeah.
right. So you can see that, wait a minute, this is a metaphor. This is a metaphor. This is not literal.
Okay.
That's the first thing we have to understand. And now I'll tell you why. But first, let's talk about the second watch of the night. The second watch of the night is the comings and goings of being. Now, the comings and goings of beings and also can be seen as a metaphor in the sense of here I am on Mount God or Olympus or something, looking down over many, many lifetimes, and I can see this guy is born and he lives so long and then he dies and then he's reborn again and he lives so long and then he dies, and I can see that the comings and goings of beings that way. There's another way of doing it. One is to just stand on a street corner in a city and just watch people come and go. So there's problematic in the way that it's even stated. But there's yet another way, and that is to watch people when they move in and out of emotional states. States when they're selfish, states when they're not selfish, states when they're friendly, states when they're angry. And when you see it like that, and you recognize, oh, there may be some deep metaphor in here. Because if you understand rebirth correctly, and by the way, the word rebirth never appears in the sutras. The word rebirth, I don't know where it came from, but it was not really early. But Bhikkhu Bodhi uses it in his translations of the Majjhima Nikaya on a regular, frequent basis, when in fact he's translating the word jati. The word jati does mean birth, but it means birth like in the sense of there it goes again, or over and over and over again. And this is why the quality of rebirth, but it doesn't necessarily mean rebirth in the sense of 100 years you die and then 300 years later you're reborn, or any of that kind of gobbledygook. What it means is that the mind is reborn into a selfish state of suffering, and then it drops out and we can be at peace. And then it's reborn again in a state of suffering. And then it drops back out into a state of peace again. This is the rebirth that the Buddha has been talking about all along. And that when he's saying that at this particular time I was this name, that name may not have been Benjamin or Tom or something. The name could have been anger. But I was with this such and such a name. I was with this such and such a family, which meant the situation that I was in, etc., like that. That's what it could also mean if you take it metaphorically. But now let's look at the third watch of the night, because that's the one that really is telling. You know, I was in the Navy and did a little bit of time on in sea duty, and that the Navy also has 3 watches of the night. I suppose that so does the Army. That there is guards. This is a military installation. It's here because it's dangerous. All right, the ship is out at sea. You gotta watch where you're going all night long, and so they have watches. There's engine room watches, and there is also the watches from the top portion where the all of the equipment is, and they can see out. You know, the captain's chair. Though the watches, they stand with their binoculars. They don't sit in the captain's chair. The captain's asleep, but the watch is on duty. Now, there's something remarkable about being on watch in the Navy, and that is the third watch of the night, they eat breakfast late. Why is that? Because during the third watch of the night is when the entire crew gets up and has breakfast. So the third watch of the night is daylight. Starts at 4 in the morning, and by 5 or 5:30, it's daylight. The third watch of the night is daylight. This is an important factor when we point to this stuff about being metaphor, because it's the third watch of the night where the Buddha really wakes up. Now we have real daylight. Now we have light enough to enlighten. And what is that daylight? In the third watch of the night, the Buddha sees the destruction of the taints, the destruction of the defilements. So very much so, what you can see is that the first and second watch of the night is the Buddha putting together the understanding of Paticca Samuppada, how the mind works, how the comings and goings of the mind actually operate, and how one is reborn. And so by putting together the Paticca Samuppada, he comes to understand how we can destroy the taints. And when we see that third watch of the night that way, we begin to understand, oh, that's part of the path, the way that the Buddha figured it out and all. But it's said in such metaphorical ways that people get attached to the rebirth quality of it, thinking that the Buddha is actually proving and believes in rebirth. Where in fact, no, it's coded message. And the personality view is that there is nothing to worry about in the past or in the future. That the right thing to do is deal with whatever is happening right now, and be on guard to make sure that the birth of the self doesn't happen right now. The birth of selfishness, the birth of fear, the birth of suffering, So that's then when we look at it, the three watches of the night, it actually, instead of promotes people's belief in rebirth, it actually helps to destroy them. Now, one further point about that, and that is that in the Brahmajala Sutta, these two first watches of the night are actually listed as two of the 61 wrong views. And it's
Okay.
funny about the Brahmajala Sutta. First off, it's got two parts to it. There's a very, very long introduction that basically has one message to it: thou shalt not gamble. And then the second part of this very long sutra, which is in the Dinga Nikaya, is number one. The Brahmajala Sutta then has a very, very long list of all of the various kinds of wrong views there are, and that part of the way that it's stated is when someone has these experiences or these memories, they take on the view that this was me. And so in that regard, that's the mistake that people are making, is not that they're having images or visions while they're in meditation. It's that they're saying, this is me. And so here's what happens. When I was in India, and this is very, very well known in India, that whenever meditators start to have past lives, everyone is curious. They want to know. It's a celebrity status. It's the teacher wants to hear all about it. Everybody goes around clapping, and that people then, especially the Westerners, start to have their own past life experiences spontaneously without recognizing that this is autosuggestion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But if that student who is having past life experiences goes to a good Buddhist meditation instructor, the guy will say, yeah, that's interesting, but never mind, come back to the present moment and start again.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not stay in the past. Even if it was a past life, let's not mess there. Let's not stay in that. Let's come to the present moment and be here now. Let's deal with the Tathagata as it is. Okay. So that's the two ways of doing it. And in Burma, you'll find both.
Mm-hmm.
So if a Westerner goes to Burma and talks to the wrong monk, and while he's having past lives experience, that monk may jump up and down for joy and encourage that Westerner to have more past life experiences. But in that same temple, he could go to a different monk and he could tell the same story about the past life experiences, and that monk will say, okay, that was nice. Never mind. Come back to the present moment and start again. Let's
Mm-hmm.
not deal in the past.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how it is. And so some people get really attached to the ideas of rebirth, and that's what puts them so they're on a path, and that they actually can, in fact, start working with anger and ill will and all kinds of other stuff. But one of the things that winds up being most difficult to deal with is the issue of conceit. Until they cut that first fetter, there will always be room for conceit. Mana, comparing ourselves to others.
Mm-hmm.
Something like, I've had more past lives than you have, ha ha. That kind of mentality. Not recognizing that a lot of that stuff happens spontaneously through autosuggestion, and that it doesn't really have a basis in fact of actual past lives. And if it did, so what? Here we are now. Let's deal with how we get out of right now, instead of trying to figure out what I can do for the past so that I can get out of right now. That makes no sense.
Yeah.
Makes no sense if it was a past life, and it makes no sense for 5 minutes ago. So that's why rebirth and belief in rebirth is such a hindrance, because it either keeps us from getting on the path altogether, or if it does not hinder us to getting on the path, which means freedom from doubt and belief in the Four Noble Truths and actually practicing on the path of Sotapan, still it's got these holes in it. Now, the interesting thing is that these holes, once they're plugged up, the whole thing is almost built already. And so a person who can go back and retrofit and get rid of the past lives, he can start moving through very quickly, very easily, because he's already started developing the skills for it. But the question would be then, is he really Sotapan or not? That's a hard question to answer. Probably the best thing to do is to give him credit for it. Because it's really the enthusiasm, it's the eagerness for the path, it's the joy of the path that's the most important. And in that regard, I would not claim then that strap-on bombers were full Sotapans in the Islamic tradition, because most of them, when they go for blowing themselves up on a bus, they don't do it joyfully. They don't do it eagerly. They do it with great trepidation. But that's the one main quality of the Sotapan. The full fruit of Sotapan is eagerness. Eagerness to hear the Dhamma, eagerness to follow the Dhamma, eagerness for understanding how the mind works. And when I say eagerness, I'm talking about not eagerness to hear another monk talk, but rather eagerness to investigate one's own mind. The eagerness to really see the Four Noble Truths, to really see what it's like to be free from suffering. This is nice. Oh, I like that. Let me try it again. That third Noble Truth is a really nice one. But we in order to really pull fruit the Sotapan, is the eagerness and the joy of being on the path, knowing for 100% without a doubt that you're on the right path. That there is no more doubt or confusion about that at all. That the Christian path, sorry, don't believe in that. Hindu, sorry, no, don't want it. Psychology, forget that one too. Neuroscience, they're coming along, but I'll take the Buddha first.
Can I ask a couple practice questions?
Absolutely. I think we beat this one to death. Before you ask those questions, let me ask you this question. You think that you can tell who's on what part of the path? Do you think you've got enough knowledge to see an Arahant when you know one, or know an Arahant when you see one?
I mean, to be honest, no. Because
guess what? It takes a long time. It takes a long time. You cannot tell by looking very quickly. You have to. It takes a long time to figure it out. It really does take one to know one.
Yeah. But okay, so okay,
but you're not going to get any straight answers from an Arahant generally. He's going to give you a long talk like this one or something like that.
Okay, so I have.
Right, practice questions. Let's go for
it. Yeah, I'm trying to think of which one to ask first. Okay, so I have a question about sitting practice. I have a question about non-sitting practice, and then I had a weird experience that I don't know. Yeah, that I just kind of like to run by you if it.
All right. Let's start with weird experience, and then we'll combine the sitting and the not sitting practice.
Okay.
Weird experience number 31.
Okay, so somebody had mentioned something along the lines of, this was last time we talked, and that day I had Yeah, I meditated a fair amount. I told you I've started this thing,
Yes, 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 yes. I
so I'm
remember.
still
Yeah.
using it. Yeah. Um, yeah, anyway, I got into my head. Well, I guess I'm trying to. So I had a dream, basically. And in the dream,
Oh, like Martin Luther King? Never
yeah,
mind. Never
just
mind.
like
Let's not go there. We'll come back to that one.
yeah. So in the dream, I uh, I was at a retreat, and yeah, there was some instruction, and it was something that I heard previously about something along the lines of like the view of the self is kind of like a magic trick, and you can try to see what the trick is, or something like that.
Hmm.
So I got that in my head in the dream, and it's really weird to describe this, but basically it felt like I was meditating in my dream, but it felt like I actually was meditating. Like it wasn't that I was dreaming I was meditating. I was actually meditating, but I was in a dream state is how it felt.
Okay.
And yeah, basically it felt like I kept on having one thought after another. And then every time I would catch a thought, then I would see that as the thought. And it was just this kind of like thing in which like I felt like I was unraveling something is what it felt like.
Okay.
When I get pretty focused, I often have kind of I guess it's PT, but it's involuntary stuff and like energy feeling is what it feels like. So that's how I
Okay.
woke up. Was that was really intense. And it woke me up. The movement woke me up basically.
Hmm.
But it wasn't like a normal dream. It was very intense. So it doesn't really matter. Oh, so the next I tried to meditate after that because I thought, oh, that may have been something significant. And I tried to meditate, and it
It
wasn't.
started religions before.
Say what?
I say that kind of stuff has started religions before.
Well, I was gonna say I tried to meditate, and it wasn't anything special. It was just like it was a crappy sit. I mean, I wasn't especially focused or anything. Then the next morning, I always when I wake up have like very that's when the my mind wanders. The most of any time of the day, it's right when I wake up. And that didn't happen. But then as the day went on, it just became a normal day. And it's never been nothing significant. I mean, there wasn't any lasting anything. Yeah, but is it possible that some so anyway, so at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because things are back to normal. But at the time, it felt like it wasn't just a normal thing. It felt like there was some kind of like my mind was processing something when I was asleep. That's kind of what it felt like. Does that
Okay.
kind
What
of,
was it? What was it? Nail it down for me.
I mean, it
If
felt
there was
like
an insight, what was it?
well, it felt like there's a part of my head that realizes stuff that another part of my head doesn't, is what it feels like. That's
Okay.
how I would describe it. It's like, well, when I was asleep without these kind of like rules and stuff, there's something that it knows it can unravel. That's what it felt like.
Okay. All right. So that was a major insight that came to you as a dream that is almost the eradication of doubt of can you unravel this mess or not? And you've come to the conclusion, yes, I can. I can unravel this mess. Is that true? Is that the way it could be stated?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that there was something. I think that there was some significance in that, and it's definitely the case because of how intense it was. Yeah, I felt like I did do it, even if I didn't actually do it. I felt like I did do it. So, yeah. Anyway, that was the experience. Um,
All right. Let me cover this in this following way. First off, this may not be very rare at all. It might, in fact, be quite common, and that um, basically what we're talking about now. You said that this happened while you were at retreat.
No, it happened a week ago. I had
After the retreat.
no after you
And
and me
okay,
talked, and after I mean that whole day I'd meditated and a
okay,
lot, and
all right.
then
So
yeah.
you're all right. That's what we're getting at. Is that after you're doing a lot of meditation, that and this happens in retreats often too, especially the longer ones, that something will happen in the night, and that and is basically in many different ways. It can be said that it's kind of a wake up, that the mind in the sleep is putting something together that has never been quite together that way before. And that there is often a lot of body movements associated with that, the rapture, the piti. Now, you already kind of knew what that was, and you could actually label it and name it. But you could also imagine that that could happen to someone who really didn't know what they were doing, other than that they should meditate, and that then they can have that kind of experience, and then they'll say things afterwards like, I was wrestling with an angel.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because look at the body movement. It's like it's wrestling with something, and yet I don't know quite what it is that I'm wrestling with. All right. You could say that that kind of dream was the beginning of Islam, because that's exactly the experience that Muhammad had. Only he didn't have a clue about what was going on. He thought it was an angel. He even
Mm-hmm.
gave it a name. Okay. And off the story runs. But it also happened to Jacob, I think, in the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
And so dreaming and being in dream states for people who are actively engaged in meditation is a very active place. It can get very, very active. The right thing to do, if it's done correctly and mindfully, is um, to let the mind fall out of the conscious state directly into deep sleep without going through this, what they call REM sleep or the dream state. And they can stay at that deep state, and that if something happens on the outside world or they need to wake up or something, then they wake fully up and don't go up to the dream state and then have a dream about it. This is one of the reasons why the ninjas and some Zen groups in Japan practice with the Zen stick, and that the senior students then, the Zen master will go into the bedroom and whack them if they don't wake up when he comes in. In other words, he wants them to get the sleep that they need, but when they wake up, to fully wake up, to don't wake up into this dream state.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but that's what you were doing, and that's what happens quite often with meditators is that they get their mind very calm, very settled, everything like that. And then while they're asleep, stuff really starts to boil and percolate and come up like that. And it will lead to pity and rapture and all kinds of bodily movements. And even, I don't know if you could qualify this as sleepwalking.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole point is that you have to actually recollect, recall, and try to figure out what the insight was that came during the dream. Or does it wake you all the way up? Does that insight actually grab you literally by the throat and set you up?
Mm-hmm.
To set you up on this bed and you say, wow, wow, what, not what was that, but look at that.
Yeah.
So that's a better kind of experience, but to have it kind of stay dreaming is okay, because actually that's the whole point. If Muhammad had just left that dreamy place or the dreamy place, the world would be much better off without Islam. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And so for you to let it go, that's the right thing to do. But there was something in there that was of value. And if you kind of put it together, though it's kind of nebulous, it comes up with that, yeah, this can be done. Now, here's the thing about doubt. Doubt normally has two major issues for every beginning student. One issue is we can boil it down to the word blame. In other words, my doubt is, can I get away with blaming others for my problems? Or maybe the doubt is it really their fault or is it mine?
Mm-hmm.
And this is part of the doubt that we all have. In other words, if I go to get assistance from something on the outside, will I actually get that assistance and get my needs met? So now we're looking at, is the blaming effective? In other words, a child comes crying to mom because he's mashed his thumb. Coming to mom doesn't stop the thumb from throbbing, right? So this whole idea of finding someone to rescue us doesn't work. And when we finally come to the solution, and part of the reason for people to coming to this understanding of anatta is now there's nothing that we can blame anymore. We have to take full on responsibility for ourselves. We cannot blame old past karma. We have to take it, this is what's happening right now. We have to deal with this right now. And so by doing so, that kind of begins to eradicate that quality of doubt that it's somebody else's or something on the outside, it's the karma machine's fault, rather than, no, this is my thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first half of that doubt, is to throw it out and take responsibility 100% for oneself. By doing so, we actually, that part of the doubt is eradicated when we come to the twin conclusion of personality view. That because there really is no person to be saved, I should give up on it getting saved. And because there is no person to be saved, then I can also give up on all the rites, rules, ritual ceremonies, rules, laws, procedures, and grep that I've been doing to try to save this thing. That's not the right way to do it. We change the attitude from that victim's position, looking to blame the outside world, and we are now left then with the second part of the doubt of, now that this is all my own responsibility, this is all of my issue, the second noble truth is real, that all of life suffering that I experience is because of my own ill will, my own greed, and my own stupidity.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have the doubt of, to be eradicated is, and can I do it?
Yeah.
Am I capable of it? And I hear that that's what you're wrestling with now. Congratulations. Even if you're dealing with it in a dream state, you're dealing with this issue. You're beginning to fully take on your own responsibility, saying, yeah, I can do this.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can. I'm actually fairly confident
I
that,
think you can too.
well, I mean, just lately things have started getting a little weird, but in a good way. So yeah, so I take that as meaning something. I realized that I was a little unclear, which is why you asked the question. I wasn't on a retreat. In the dream, I was on a retreat, and then
That's
and then I
just as
had,
good. Okay.
yeah. No, I wasn't on a retreat, but I dreamt that I was on a retreat, and then I started. Yeah, that thing happened, and then I woke up and my heart was racing and all sorts of stuff. But yeah, um, yeah. So okay, cool. So that was really weird. Um, but then, so during sits now, I've I mentioned it to you before, and this isn't in the Mind Illuminated, and it's not in anything that you've said, but it's something that I find fun to do. So this is what I've been doing. So basically, when I get pretty calm, my mind gets pretty calm, and I'm doing breath meditation, and a thought comes up, it feels like there's like a location to that thought. So, and sometimes it's vague. Sometimes like, oh, it's somewhere in my head. But sometimes it's like, oh, it's this part of my head, or it's this part of my head is kind of what it feels like. So the practice that I've been doing, which is I've gotten really good concentration doing it, is I have the intention to stay on my breath. And then I also have the intention that any change, any movement in my body, that I know where it is. And what naturally happens when I do that is that thoughts feel like that too. So, like, if a thought comes, rather than knowing much about what it is, I just know where it's located in the same way that if an itch comes, I just kind of know where on my body it's located. And so sometimes I don't know exactly where it is, but it's like, oh, it feels kind of like it's back there. And I don't like verbalize it or think about it too much, but it's very kind of like, it's like the thoughts feel like they're kind of the same thing as other body sensations in a way. I mean, I can tell the difference between them, but like I said, they're just other, they're just other phenomena rather than like, oh, this is what happened yesterday. It's just like, oh, there's like some activity back here or something. I don't know how to
Okay.
describe it outside of that. But
One of
yes.
the things that I've been looking at is your fingers and where you're pointing. And for
Uh-huh.
a while you were pointing here, and that's generally not a place where thoughts happen. But then you're pointing that kind of in the mid range, because you're not pointing here, but sometimes you're also pointing back here.
Yeah.
Do you recognize that you're doing that?
Yeah.
Was that intentional? Was that the signals you were intending to send to me gesturally?
Yeah. So it
Okay.
depends. Well, so I'll say like I find the visual stuff tends to feel so by the way, I don't think this is actually where the thoughts are originating. I feel like it's my brain trying to figure it out or something. But the kind of verbal stuff tends to be
Actually, you can at least accept this, that if there is an actual part of the brain that's more active than other parts of the brain, then it should be because of the neurons of the skin and other places for you to be able to detect that. And that's what MRIs, actually functional MRIs, are all about. And so, if a student would tell me that they can actually experience sensations of the ways of thinking, I would say, okay, that didn't
yeah.
sound magic to me at all. That sounds like that you're becoming sensitive to, and not only that, but you're pointing at the parts of the brain that are known for the things that you're talking about. So you're actually pointing at the right places. For instance, thinking is part of the mammalian brain that's in the middle section and it overlays some parts of the reptilian brain. And
Sometimes
this
it
is
feels like
where
it's
that's
sometimes
also the cerebellum. When you're pointing back there, you're pointing at the cerebellum, which is the source of um, both stored emotions and also um, memories that are associated with emotions. So you can feel both of those things. Those would be the two areas of the body that a meditator would most likely to wake up to first.
so so I've been doing this. I mean, today and yesterday, I didn't have very good focus, but I sometimes that just happens randomly. But yeah, I feel like yeah, basically just being on my breath and just being aware of whatever sensations there are, I just kind of drop into really deep, just a really yeah, I don't know how to describe it. It's uh the distractions are way less. Generally, when I meditate now, my main thing used to always be verbal thoughts, like
Hmm.
talking to somebody. Like I would imagine me telling somebody something, and I still get that sometimes, but way less. And I'd say relatively, there's a lot more imagery than there is that, and there's also a lot more like I'd feel like an intention rather than it'll just be like awareness that there's a verbalization that would happen if I let it play out, but it's like I catch it before it comes to the surface because I'm aware of it before it bubbles that high that I'm actually conscious of what's going on, and then it just kind of goes back down.
Okay. Let me describe it like this for you to see if this fits. Let's use the word.
Sorry, my laptop's gonna die if I don't plug it in real fast. Good.
If you don't mind, I need to take a short break. I'll be right back too. Hang on
Okay.
one
All
minute.
right. Yeah. A distinct but distant flushing sound. Yeah, I took a break too.
Okay, so we were about to start talking about practice, or
Oh,
do you
yeah, well
want
I
to
just yeah,
go
so I
ahead?
just mentioned to you that yeah, so that's what's going on in my sitting practice is that thoughts have started kind of feeling like body sensations in a weird way. Just in the sense that there's less content in them. It's more just kind of like activity um and then I've also noticed that sometimes if I don't even when I don't even know what a thought is, I'll notice body reactions even before I have any idea of any content in them. So like I'll get stressed or something before I have any idea what it is.
That's exactly what we're looking for. Okay, so let me pick back up where we were leaving off. The operative word here that we're going to investigate is the word witness, because witness has the two qualities in our normal language. Is one, the witness is the one who saw what happened. And then the other kind of witness is perhaps that same guy who goes on to the witness stand in court and becomes a sworn witness. One is seeing, the other one is the telling of the story about what is seen. And you're beginning to break these things up within yourself. You're just talking about that. That there is See, the old way or the slow way is to always see, tell, see, tell, see, tell. Now you're beginning to see without telling the story.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
That's
Go
true.
with that. Exactly. Because what's actually beginning to happen is you will begin to see that certain things and sensations that happen in the body happen to everybody, but they think ignorantly. And so the following thing can happen. Imagine that an old farmer is sitting in his hovel and he's sitting in front of his fire way back when, and he has this anxiety in his chest, and he recognizes something's not right here. And so then he tries to think of what is it that's not right, and he says, "Oh, I know what it is. I didn't fix the fence. And if I don't fix the fence, the goat's going to get out." So he goes out at night and he fixes the fence so the goat can't get out. He comes back into the hovel, and guess what? The anxiety is still there. It comes back. All right. What we're really looking at is that which is the cause and which is the effect. Does the anxiety cause the thought, or do the thoughts cause the anxiety? And you've just stumbled upon the issue that maybe the anxiety comes first. And then the thoughts about how to relieve that anxiety come second. Is that possible?
Yeah, I mean, that's consistent with what I experience for
Okay, well,
sure.
that's the whole important point is that you know how to experience a whole lot better than you know how to tell the story. What
Uh-huh.
I've got here is I've got the story because I've had the experience too, and
Uh-huh.
been with teachers who helped me to explain what's going on. Okay, so now we know this is the issue then about the Mahasi method, and that it has a particular use or value. And that
Mm-hmm.
is that the first thing is that the mind just wanders, it's on its own. Then the practitioner begins to practice. And as he's practicing, he begins to be able to come back to the breath more and more and be here now, but that thought system will be off on its own, doing its own thing. And in other words, we haven't really gotten rid of the hindrances, but we are more focused. We are kind of here now, but that background noise is still going on. They call it background sometimes. So what we need to do now is to bring it to the fore, and this is where the noting comes in with the Mahasi method. Is that the Mahasi method is actually a way of telling a story in verbal what's happening right now. Rising, falling, touching, sitting, itch, drowsiness, all of
Mm-hmm.
that is a noting verbally of what's happening right here and now. But also, that actually is a lot of work and takes a lot of perception. And so it's better to sort of, after we're able to do the noting verbally, we can begin to just go with experiencing it and staying with that and leaving what used to be hindrances. And then we're noting is now just a verbal system that only occasionally comes up. It's not completely silent, but really what's going on is we're focused on what's going on and not so much focused on telling a story about it, or in fact, in ordinary world, is telling a story about whatever's just off in the storytelling world. So we come out of the storytelling world into beginning to really tell the story about what's happening right now. And then we start to even pay more attention to what's actually happening and not putting any emphasis at all on telling the story. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when you begin to see, oh, wait a minute, that's tension right there in the body. I can experience and feel that without the story.
Mm-hmm.
I can experience that tension that comes up in my shoulders. You'll begin to see that, in fact, at work, because we've talked about that before. That's one of the places that you'll have a bodily sensation, a bodily reaction. The shoulders will rise.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what we're now going to be looking for, because this is the real issue. The real issue is that the reptilian brain is pumping chemicals into the body that we do not need, and it keeps us unhappy, upset, on guard, ready for danger that intellectually we know doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So what we need to do is start dealing with those sensations and feelings directly, because the old way, the way of the world, is to deal with those feelings by doing something. We say, oh no, doing something never solves those feelings. At best, they only make it worse. So we stop doing. In fact, we even stop talking about it and just start watching and begin to investigate basically how can we use the breath itself to break that stuff up, because a long deep breath is going to move that part. It's going to move that blood around. It's going to actually start using the bottom part of the chest area so that you can get good oxygen by starting to take deep breaths. That these deep breaths will help you to not only see that anxiety, that stress that can be built into the body and seen, but it can help break it up also, so that you now can come to a state of recognition that all the that tension and anxiety is actually melting away, and I can come to a state of peace. I can come to a state of relaxation. That when that heat of that anxiety is turned off, then a real
Uh-oh. Uh-oh, you froze.